Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Our next guest is actually the fourth most popular podcast episode we've ever had on the podcast, which is Miss Heather. She came recently, well, not recently, but she came in the past to talk about her number one secret to not burning out herself, her team, her business. And I brought her back to the podcast because I'm on the backside of this incredible work conference that I went to called The Gathering, where I was in the company of some of the most elite marketers and branding experts in the world. And we all had the opportunity to take our mask off and to be really vulnerable and talk about loss, talk about suicide, talk about things that have happened to us, and like what it is like to be a high performer, not having the space, the capacity, the time to let the glass balls that we juggle on a daily basis drop. This is literally Heather's number one area of mastery. She's constantly conversing about this on her podcast called the Emotionally Uncomfortable Podcast. And I brought her back to the Rainmaker Podcast to explore this conversation truthfully and vulnerability that I felt with the feelings that I was, processing on the backside of this event that was so raw, that was so emotional. And so if you are someone who doesn't have the affordability to have a breakdown, doesn't have the space to be human, I think this podcast episode is going to be really special for you. So without further ado, please welcome back my guest, Heather. Heather, welcome back to the podcast.
I'm excited.
Okay, just so people understand, I have done over 100 episodes on the Rainmaker podcast. Your last episode, which was like the number one secret to not burning out yourself, your team, your business, is our fourth most popular episode of the entire catalog, which has nothing to do with marketing, really. Isn't that amazing? On a marketing podcast.
Yeah. And you know what I told you?
What?
That it's like people are burning out.
Yes.
People know how they're feeling. They know what they don't want.
Yes.
But they're more attracted to buying into, give me more money, give
Yes.
me more of this, give me more of that. And you got to go towards what you want, and
Yes.
you got to invest in what you actually need, and you're going to get there so much quicker.
Okay. I'm going to tell you a story because literally having us record this on the backside of an event that I just went to is the most perfect cosmic timing, and I'll explain why. Last week, I don't know when this will air, but last week, I personally flew out to Banff, Canada to attend this big conference called The Gathering. It was their 11th year, and they have the who's who of brands and marketing. And you have MTV, Levi's, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, the NFL, Reddit, then again, the who's who of the marketing world, right? And they're all coming to speak, and they're all coming to contribute. And it's this really beautiful location in Banff. The co-founder of the event, his name is Ryan. He opens the event. He's more of the emotional co-founder. Then you have Chris Nealon, who is more of the logical, and he's like the brand social anthropologist kind of guy. So Ryan opens it up, and you can tell he's like really shaky, and you're like, what's about to happen? And he's like, I debated whether or not to even share this with you because I don't want to. And we're like, oh, I mean, this room is hundreds. I mean, we're over 1,000 people in this room. Mm-hmm. So it's still intimate, but big, at the same time. And so he basically shares the story of how in the last 6 months, he has personally lost 3, 4, 5 of some of the closest individuals possible to him, his father, his best friend. And they've either died suddenly with no warning or suicide. Mm-hmm. The next day, the VP of community from Reddit is sharing her keynote on why your community strategy isn't working. And it's this really amazing keynote. And then in the last 15 minutes, she sits down in this chair and the tissues come out. I'm like, what is about to happen? And she shares that her brother 2 weeks ago committed suicide. And she's like, I feel disingenuous getting on stage, giving you a keynote about community and how vulnerability is the source of some of the best communities in the world without also disclosing to you that community failed my own brother.
Hmm.
And I'm just like beside, I mean, obviously also hysterically crying. We're all crying. Everyone's crying because that's a hard juggernaut. That's a hard thing to drop. But because Ryan, the co-founder, opened the event and because other speakers were so vulnerable and raw, it then gave permission to some of the most elite professionals in the room to then start verbalizing at lunch, in the hallway, in cocktail hour, in inner sanctums, how hard it's been for them,
Yeah.
how difficult life has been, how lack of space, capacity, time to be balanced and integrated and whole. And I'm like, of all the people to then bring this conversation to, it's you. This is literally your expertise and mastery. And so I just am really grateful to have you on the podcast to talk about this on the backside of what I experienced, to be honest, like selfishly, just for me.
Thank you. It sounds like everyone took off their mask.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And again, this was my first year, so I didn't have a benchmark. And so I'm walking into this event. I'm like, I was not prepared for as much crying as I am personally experiencing. And I wasn't prepared to experience that with people who are like at the highest, most elite levels, are walking around with their executive assistants. Like, again, these are the best of the best and struggle. Same struggles.
Mm-hmm. They're
Uh,
human.
Yeah. Well, and you work with high-end professionals on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it, in spite of our wildly high IQ scores, intelligence, understanding, self-awareness, do we still find ourselves in these situations of self-catastrophe?
Because you're human. You cannot control things happening to you,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
part of, I'm going to call it ambition. So most of the women that I'm working with are professional women raising children. And the raising children part is really important because mothering and motherhood was such a huge part of my brand coming into
Hmm.
the work I wanted to do. But these women want to make an impact in the world. And so you play the game, you do the thing, you check the boxes, and along the way, you forget that your needs matter and like your emotional, like, I don't want to say your emotions will lead you back home to yourself because I think we spend way too much time culturally dissecting and ruminating an emotion
Yeah,
and
rumination is bad.
not enough in how can these lead me back home? What is this
Uh-huh.
calling me to do? And I do think, like, I am not surprised and I'm actually wildly impressed because most of the time when I go to conferences like that, I want to poke my fucking eyes out. Let's just be honest.
Agreed.
I am not like, I don't get jazzed about the same things that you do. But like when it is dry AF and you're just reading people's PowerPoints or they're just like, yeah, like that was a great performance. But like we talked about this on my podcast. The last 4 years have been hell for a lot of business owners.
Yeah.
And you know how many times I've had conversations? I mean, I slip into your Voxer and I'll be like, am I the only one struggling with this? And you're
Hmm.
like, no, Heather, every business owner I talk to. And then I go to those business owners and they're lying to me point blank to my face. Oh my God, like spiritually bypassing what is actually happening. And I'm like, I'm not here for fake anymore. I am
Hmm.
not here for like lipstick on a pig. You
Hmm.
need to, it's okay to be armored. It's okay to wear a mask, to have your coping strategies, but we are not going to be able to like ramp ourselves up and be like, oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I just need to suppress. I just need to suppress. Like, I don't think we're living in a culture that we can do that anymore. But it's also like that just goes to show that you can be successful and have personal crisis. You can be successful and be vulnerable. And it is not a weakness. And I think we are living in a time
Hmm.
where we have no other option but to show
Hmm.
our humanness in our businesses, our brands, and definitely in our personal lives as well.
The thing that I hear a lot is, I don't have time to get sick. I don't have time to have a breakdown. I don't have
I'm so
time
triggered right now.
to feel my emotions. I don't have time to deal with the inconvenience of being human.
Yeah.
I almost hear that verbatim, word for word, on a regular basis. Now, this is not my specialty. Like, I'm like, go to therapy. like, like that's, I don't know what to do with that. I feel you. I can, like, I just had one of the craziest months of the year in back to back travel. And what did I do? I over supplemented. I'm like, I need this and I need this because I can't afford to get sick. I can't afford to get in a fight with my spouse. I can't afford anything. I just got to like focus on the job at hand. But when you're in that perpetual state of that mode, there's no space to be human.
But the beauty of it, and I've surrendered to this. So if somebody shows up in my world and they say that, I believe them. And
Yes.
I say, you don't have time, but just wait until your life shows you that you don't have time. And I've had many experiences like this, but 2013, like getting cancer was that for me. I truly believed I didn't have time to take care of myself before that. And, universe, God, source was like, all right, I'm going to show you that. And then I had all the time in the world to take care of myself. And the reality is, that statement is coming from a place of lack. So you're living in time debt. And when you're living in time debt, you're probably also living in financial debt or energetic debt as well.
Mm.
So, financial debt may be that your bank account may have funds in it, but mentally and emotionally, you are living in financial debt. And so it doesn't matter how much money you make, how profitable on paper your business is. If you don't know how to feel alive, if you don't know how to feel profitable, you are never going to get what you're actually going after.
I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying because like I it's my job to identify what identity marketing is. The definition of identity marketing is this. When you say time debt or energy debt, to me this is where I get, again, this is more your specialty than mine, but like that seems it's intangible. I can't touch it. Like, what do you mean when you say time debt and energy debt? Like, what does that actually mean?
Okay, so what do you think about when you hear financial debt? Like, I'm in
Your
debt.
bank is, you've overdrafted your bank.
Okay. So you can have two different people that
Okay.
experience that differently. You're going to have the person that says, yeah, and I'm using this debt to reinvest in XYZ. Like you hear it all the time. Someone's like, I love debt. Like I've taken debt and
Oh,
I've
like these real estate
It
investors.
could be a
Yeah,
real estate
sure.
investor, or you just have two different people that experience it differently, right?
Hmm.
So, time debt is the same thing. You are investing your time way more than what you actually have. And it's not the 24 hours in a day.
Okay.
Perfect example of that is I have my long ass to do list. Okay. And it's in front of me. And when I look at my calendar, and I've done this before, I'm back to back with 4 podcast interviews and kids stuff and blah, blah, blah. Realistically, and I've told my team I'm going to get all those things done. That's time debt.
Okay.
So the allocation of resources is not there. And they could look me dead square in the eyes and they're like, you're going to get this to me by end of day. And I'm like, 100%. I truly believe
I love how
that
you like checked me and like, yeah, okay. Hmm.
100% that I'm going to get it
Uh-huh.
done. And the reality is, I'm not going to because I'm also in energetic debt, mental energy, physical energy, maybe emotional energy. And I'm not going to have the capacity at the end of the day with all the energy output from everything else I
Mm.
did to have the mental capacity to strategically get something done or creatively get something done. And so that's where people start living in time debt and energy debt, but they're so mentally focused on what's in their bank account. And I'm like, your priorities and your mental focus are focused on the wrong thing. It's like staring at a wall,
Mm-hmm.
beating your face against the wall, and someone is saying, hey, if you just walk 10 feet, the wall ends. And they're like, well, bam. It's the repetition of if you keep like doing the same thing, you're going to get the same result. And so debt is like lack.
Mm.
So it's restriction. I go through this whole process and I'm like, how do you want to feel? No one has ever said to me, Heather, I want to feel like shit. I want to feel fatigued. I want to feel chronically exhausted. I want to feel like, I just want to feel chronically disrespected. I want to feel like disconnected from myself and my children. I want to feel like I'm failing. Nobody says that. We know how we want to feel. I want to feel energized. I want to feel alive. I want to feel like the weight of the world and the economy and politics are not weighing me down. I want to feel light. I want to feel spacious. You know how you want to feel. You just have no idea what skills you need to acquire and implement in order to get to where you want to go.
Okay, this is what it feels like listening to you. I want to feel peace. I want to be able to, like, it's okay if from 9 to 10 I'm just slow to start my day and it's not stressing me out that I haven't started my day before 10 in the morning, and that I could enjoy something warm or something, like, like a hot chocolate or something. Like, I want this and I want this and I want this. But the part that, like, my brain immediately, or there's a part of me, or the brain, a part of me, personality, whatever, it goes, nope. Because in order to have that, and that feeling that is associated with that experience would require you to drop glass balls that you are currently juggling. None of the balls that I have are rubber. If I drop them, they crash, they shatter. I can't drop my kids. I can't drop my career. I can't drop my spouse. I can't drop this, or that responsibility. And so, in order for me to feel what you're describing, it would require failure in some other capacity. That's what it feels like to me. And I feel like I have to choose between the two, to fail here, but to gain this, which would be a selfish gain. Hit me.
Oh, yeah.
You said you want to make me cry today.
Well, I think it's selfish of you
Shut
to
up.
think that way.
Okay. Tell me.
I don't know if we have enough time, but when you were talking, what I was thinking about is, damn, she's holding a lot of shit that's not even hers to carry. And what I mean by that is we have these stories
Mm-hmm.
of I am this, I am this, I am this, I am this, and I'm chronically going like this, getting the plates and the balls in the air, da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
Like that feels exhausting.
Yeah, fine china.
So number one is, what are you carrying that's not actually yours to carry?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, because we know that when we're carrying the load for somebody else, it actually doesn't take away from their load. We've just multiplied it, right? That person is still the exact same person. And so it's that high functioning overachiever, like codependent inside of us that thinks, if I work harder, if I do more, if I get up even earlier and go to bed even later, and I squeezing every second out of do, we're not being. And when we're doing, we're not actually present, and we're taking away from other people. And so we take on everybody else's energy, we take on everybody else's problems, and we try to solve them thinking that we are actually solving them. But what we're doing is taking away from other people. And I see people doing this in their business with their team.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I see
Mm-hmm.
it at home with their children. I see it at home with their partners, taking on everybody else's problem instead of changing the identity, and instead of being the rescuer, being the coach for people. Like, who do you need me to be? How can I hold space for you without being the doer of your work?
Okay, this is really interesting. This one resonates with me a lot because before I met you, I don't think I would have ever put in my catalog of labels rescuer, servant, helper, sure.
Mm-hmm.
And you were the one that was like, are you helping or are you rescuing? I'm like, what? And like this morning, I was like getting on the boys. I'm like, I need help. I need help. Like, it's trash day. We need to get the trash out. And I'm like, my oldest, who's 10, I'm like, can you go through the house and take the trash out of the trash cans? And then we can take it outside. And he looks at me. He's like, well, I did that last week. And I'm like, how does that pertain to this week? Like today, like I need it done today. He's smart ass. Like today I need it. But like I was telling my husband, because he's like, he was coming home from work and I just dropped off the boys. He's like, I can feel something in your voice. And I'm like, I think what you're picking up is just the amount of expenditure on my part to have had to like convince my son or persuade my son. I don't, just to even have the conversation. Ugh, it's easier if I just do it my freaking
I can solve all your problems right now.
self. Okay,
Okay.
go.
Number one, you are the problem. Number two, I'm half kidding.
Cheeky. No, you're not.
That's a red zone moment.
Okay.
Red zone moment. You're like, shit, garbage day, right? You also are coming in hot off of travel, so you're like knocked down a few inches.
Patience, yeah.
Yes. But it's a red zone moment where yeah, you did it last week, but this is yours. Own
Mm.
it. This is yours. You do this every Thursday morning before
Mhm.
school. Like this is your thing,
Mhm.
and you train them so that
Mhm.
they get to a point where you're like, I don't, they just have their SOP. They know what they need to do. They're boys, step by step by step.
Mhm.
What is their currency of choice? Probably Wi Fi in some capacity, could be something else that they
Mhm.
love. And
Mhm.
it's like, thank you. We work together as a team. So, what I do is when I find myself angry, resentful, chippy, red zone moments, instead of like, yeah, I may blow up and I have to go back in for the repair,
Yep.
and repair take time. Repair takes energy, emotional energy. Now you're riddled with guilt all day.
Twice emotional expenditure,
Yeah,
right?
which
Yeah.
affects your quality and productivity of your work when you are focused with it. And sometimes you feel so guilty, you're just like trying to solve the problem with money. You're just like, oh shit, now I got to buy this, now I got to do that. I
Mhm.
don't know. It just costs a lot financially, emotionally, physically, like actual physical time. So I go to myself, I'm like, how did I get here? I'm going to take radical ownership and responsibility. I'm going to try to dissect the situation. It could be in my business, it could be at home. How did I get here? I'm not blaming my boys. I'm not blaming my husband. I'm not blaming the rain. How did I get here? I got here because we actually don't even have a system or a process in place. This is
Mm.
not sustainable. My husband was gone most of the summer because we got a cottage and I host retreats. And like, so we were just like ships passing in the night. And I 100% said, this is not sustainable. You have the roles that you've taken on in the house. As soon as you remove yourself, that goes right on my plate. I'm not doing this again. So either all those balls are going to drop or we get systems and processes in place. But I had to raise my standards for how I wanted to feel. If I didn't raise my standard and said this is a non negotiable for me, like he gave me pushback, I had to sit with my, I'm a woman. I should be able to do this. I should be able to do that.
Oof.
But
Yeah.
I had to sit with this is not okay. My anger is telling me something. My resentment is telling me something. And then I reverse engineer. I get clear. How do I want to feel in the morning? I want morning to feel light. I want it to feel peaceful. Great. Then I got to train these kids to run around the house, emptying all the garbage out, and that they're going to own this role. But guess what's going to happen? Next week, they're going to be like, yeah, I think she's just having a little midlife crisis. Let's see how long she hangs on to this. So, what you have to do is hold the boundary, right?
Mhm.
And you have to test yourself. And you're like, okay, we're headed into the holiday season. Let's see if I can train them for the next 2 months that this is their role. Hey, boys, reminder, this is what we're doing. Hey, guys, this is what we're doing. This is what they're doing. And eventually, if you don't crack, if you don't maneuver, if you don't like waver on your boundaries and you have a system in place, you'll be like, did you do it? They're like, yeah. It's the same with, I'm like, I refuse to feed these dogs. I refuse. We have 2 dogs. I'm like, there's 3 children in the house. There's no reason why I need to clean a dish or feed the dogs. So I test. I'm like, how can I take this off of my mental load? How can I take it off of my plate? And these things happen now because people have owned the role. People have
Mhm.
owned the identity, and I'm not carrying it, and it's actually giving them a sense of purpose and
Mhm.
pride and to learn the skill.
I really like what you said about the red zone. Red zone moments. I'm like, ooh,
Red,
I
green, yellow.
yeah, because you have them everywhere. I have them in work. I'll have them at home. I'll have them in this relationship or this dynamic. And I like how you talk about like your relationship with your emotions. You're like, what is anger teaching me, or why? Like
Mhm,
you embrace. It's almost like you are now trained your body to know that when I get pissed off or I get triggered, it's an invitation for self reflection.
mhm.
I'm like, "Pfft, how many people have that level of emotional agility and maturity to even have that go through their brain as they're feeling a red zone moment feeling? That's really interesting.
Well, I had a moment yesterday on the team as a perfect example. There was a mistake that happened
Uh-huh.
and it cost me money. And I was like, I don't want to pay for this. I'm not the one that made the mistake. And I'm like, well, this is just, it's $100 mistake. It's not a $10,000 mistake. Like, this is part of being a business owner. And instead of going to the manager that was managing what I would call the doer, I was like, this person was set up for failure. They were not, the leadership was not correct. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so what part of that can I own? And what lesson am I learning that cost me $100 instead of the lesson costing me $10,000 down the road? Immediately, I took ownership. Immediately, I learned a lesson. And then I conveyed that to the manager. And I was like, what are you learning here? And I led the manager and I was like, I will do this once. I will not do this again. So I held the boundary. I stated the consequence if it happens again. And I'm going to revisit it again. I'm going to go to the doer and I'm going to say, I apologize that you were set up for failure. What did you learn from this? And everyone, it's just about relationships. And I will bring it up again and again and again, not the exact same situation, but I'm like, hey, where can we better communicate? What systems or processes do you need?
Yeah.
And you always learn and then you move on. There's no resentment, there's no anger. Was I triggered? 100% I was triggered. Did I go down a red zone rabbit hole for 10 minutes? The old me, that would have been days.
Mm.
And so it's who do you need to become in order to get to your next level? Oftentimes people are like stuck. They're capped at a revenue. They're capped
Yeah.
at, they're like, I see my patterns over and over and over again. And I'm like, you can continue to throw money at this problem or you can look in the mirror. And you're going to have to look in the mirror sooner rather than later. And
Yeah.
so part of the reason from my emotional agility is because I look at the mirror on a daily basis and I just grow so much
Hmm.
quicker because of it.
I think you're gonna like this next story. His name is Jesse Cole. He is the owner of the Savannah Bananas. I don't know if you've seen them. They wear like really like loud yellow baseball uniforms, and they've like made baseball fun, and they do like the Macarena on the
I think
bases
we
and
hang out with different people, but yes,
yeah. Well, it's like modern day like PT Barnum kind of guy. And he talked about how like ideation is a muscle that needs to be exercised on a daily basis. If not, you lose the ability to have ideas like that. And so every single day he challenges himself to come up with 10 to 15 new ideas to make, new ideas for the baseball game. And then his team every Tuesday has the what they call over the top meeting, where they're all supposed to bring these ideas, and like they have to all be over the top, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. But it makes me think about like your emotional agility being a muscle, like the fact that you are embracing the mirror and the moment, the moment in the mirror on a daily basis is a muscle that you've certainly earned, so that you can take something that would have taken days to process in more 10 minutes of a rinse and like you're going through the car wash emotionally to come out and make it more productive. Here's a question I have for you though. This is always like weighed on me. I feel like when I talk to like really successful humans, it's jarring moments in life that make them change, right? Like I got diagnosed, I went to the hospital, my so and so my family got sick, like, and then they change their life, and then they go, oh, I'm going to eat right, I'm going to do the right things, or I'm gonna, like, because that's really hard for you as a provider. Like you can't wait for somebody's tragedy to then have them be softened and humbled enough in order for them to do the right thing that they should have done the whole time, and they already knew they should have done this the whole time. Like, is that true for most of your people that you work with? Or do you think that there's a way to come to the work without being forced to come to the work in a tragedy like that?
it's a yes and, but when you
Okay.
were talking, I think number one, the culture is shifting, right? Like also the power of storytelling. If I'm in a room on a stage and somebody is telling a story, and this is why marketing needs stories, and I can see in the way that they are communicating in their storytelling, and I can see myself in their story. They don't have to talk about tragedy. They could be talking about anything. And I can see the transformation and I can see like the train wreck happening in my life if shit doesn't change. It's persuasive marketing. And they can convince me that, like, for me, it's convincing people that taking care of themselves is the most unselfish thing they can do for their business, for their children, for their bank account, for their team. And people will come to me in a crisis when their team is breaking down, when they feel disconnected in their relationships at home, their health, whatever it is. But I too, we could talk about my moments of crisis, but I too can now see crisis that may occur in my future if I'm not proactive about my life instead of reactive. So I say the yes and because I think some people have had personal tragedy. Some people know somebody and they're, 8 degrees of separation. Also, I look at the generation, like my parents, and I'm like, I don't want to be like that. I know that I need to start investing now in my mind, in my body, in my bank account, my relationships, so that I don't end up in certain situations as like the baby boomer generation. So I look into the future. I look at how did you get there? Reverse engineer who I need to be now. And there are a few crisis moments in my life, but I'm also the type of person, and this could have started from a survival skill. I'm the type of person who won't quit. So, but when I started, like I became a mother when I was 18. And so that's a pretty good kick in the ass to sink or swim. And then being diagnosed, and then like, okay, when my back has been, in a corner in business or in a relationship, I'm always like, how the hell did I get here? What was I avoiding? And Heather, if you don't want to get here again, you need to become the type of person that stops avoiding these areas of your life. But people do come to me. They're like, I've been following you for X amount of years. I'm ready. One woman in particular, I remember I talked to her forever ago, and she was like, I can't afford it. First of all, buyers are liars, but I can't afford it. I can't afford it. I can't afford it. I said, okay. I was like trying to handle the objections. I was like, listen, I really see that I can be of service. Like, how can we meet you where you are? She wouldn't give me $1. Okay. She was absolutely terrified to open that can of worms. 3 years later, she goes, oh, yeah, it wasn't the money. She's like, I was just terrified to do this inner work. Something happened in her life. She's like, I don't even care how much it is. Here's my credit card. And then retention was there. And she's like, you changed my life. You saved my life. And I'm like, what you resist will persist and grow bigger until you're willing to look at it.
I think what you said, without realizing how brilliant, Heather, you could forecast crisis as a consequence of not addressing things in the present. I don't think anybody actually has that gift or that skill that you just said that you can do. And so we just coast along until the car crash because we're like, well, I don't know when the lottery hits me, but maybe hopefully it will be like further out. And so the fact that you can acutely, with personification and accuracy, almost forecast a crisis as a consequence to not addressing things is what?
That's using my trauma response in its strength, by the way. Like, I'm very good in a crisis, but when I'm in the shadow of that, right? That I'm on the move all the time. But when
Mm,
it's healthy, because I think our coping strategies can be in like a shadow, or it could be in its strength. So in its strength, of course, I had to figure that out, when I almost died. And I had to
yeah.
figure that out when I used to be in a very abusive relationship with somebody. I didn't feel safe going out into society. I was always on high alert. I don't feel like that anymore, but I can see it in the future for people, and I tell them. But here's the thing, I've had to do so much work to not be the rescuer of other people's work. We talked about it on my podcast when I was interviewing you, like not being the rescuer of other people's work. And I will now say, here's what I see. Call it a gift, call it intuition, call it whatever you want. Here's what I see. Like, it's very easy for me to see, but you have to choose. You have to choose. Are you ready to make the commitment to just lean in? I'm not asking you to run a marathon. I'm just asking you to put your shoes on. Are you willing to make a decision? Not making a decision to change is a decision. And you can pretend that you don't have time. You can pretend you don't have the money. You can pretend your husband or partner doesn't support you. You can pretend you're just waiting for the election to be over. You can pretend you're waiting for 2025, or you could just make a decision.
Mm. Mm, 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 mm. Solid. This is why I knew you'd be perfect for this dialogue.
But it's the same with marketing. It's the same with sales. Like I
Mm-hmm.
look now and I'm where I'm sitting today. I mean, my nervous system feels very calm, cool, collected. But when I was working with you, I was having panic attacks in the middle of the night. And I didn't, to be honest, I reflect on that moment all the time. I wouldn't say I was seriously in a crisis. I think my physical body, like I had some hormonal stuff going on, but it was a stress response from
Mm-hmm.
things that happened a year before. And like, I know I wasn't alone either,
Yeah.
but I look at my body that's saying, hello, pay attention to me. And then
Yeah.
I'm on high alert in other areas. What is not sustainable? And I'm always telling people, get ahead of it so
Yeah.
that when life happens, you can say, I can take 6 months off and be okay financially. I can take a year off and be okay. I can be 100% present with my parents, my sister,
Mm.
whatever it is. My child needs me in this season of their life and we are okay. So I'm always looking at every bucket of my life, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, financial,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, how full can I get this cup?
Mm-hmm.
But that is not what we're taught as women.
Mm-hmm.
How empty can my cup be? Because if there's any extra, I have to give it away. And
Yeah.
I'm like, let it overflow and then give the extra. But I'm telling you right now, a resource woman, that is what we're searching for.
It's interesting because, like, I think you said about the story, the power of storytelling. How many stories start with, I was in the hospital, or this shit happened, or this happened, or that, and that's where the story begins. But it's almost like if your call to arms is, let's get ahead of it. I want that story. Like, because I got ahead of it when the crisis came, I was ready. Like, where's those stories?
Those people don't think they're qualified because
Yeah.
they haven't hit a rock bottom. I get triggered by that, but there's nothing I can do about it because it's not my work to do. But I'm like, do you know how many people are out there telling themselves the exact same story that, yeah, I'm not qualified because I haven't had a crisis?
Mm.
And I'm like, and they're just sitting idly waiting for a crisis to
Yeah,
happen so that they
exactly.
have something to tell. And I'm like, what if you were that average person that's like, I just wasn't willing to have a crisis? Like,
Mm.
literally, how empowering that is. That's a
Mm-hmm.
generational pattern.
Mm-hmm.
How empowering that is. And my children are so annoyed by me because of that, because I see when they, like, I think in the red, yellow, green zone. I know when they're in a red zone. I know when they're headed towards like utter catastrophe, and I try to catch them in their yellow zone. And I'm like, you don't have to hit a rock bottom
Yeah.
in order to change. You
Yeah.
can actually just thrive because it's your birthright.
Mm. Woo! Where do people hang out with you? Where do people learn more about what it is that you do? Because I like to think the people that listen to this podcast and the kind of guests that I've had, they are the resourceful type of humans. They are the women and men who have grit and pride themselves on getting ahead of all things.
Mhm.
Because of my sister's cancer diagnosis, you best be straight that I am absolutely getting ahead of it. I don't want that to be my story. And so even though I've never been diagnosed with cancer, I'm like behaving in such a way because I don't ever want that to be my narrative. So how can people work with you so that they can get ahead of it?
Mhm. So you can definitely listen to the podcast, Emotionally
Yes.
Uncomfortable.
So
That's where I
good.
hang out a lot. You can hang out with me in the woods. I take your cell phone
In
away.
the
Take your
cottage.
cell phone away. No, but hang out on Emotionally Uncomfortable. Go follow me on Instagram at Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN, or my name, heatherchauvin.com.
Love it. I love you.
Yay, love you.
Thanks for being on today's podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at Via Romney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.